Wow, he's back, walking around in the middle of the night in Denmark, in the winter. It's cold and desolate and slightly raining. It's been a minute, guys, since I did one of these videos, and to be honest, part of the reason is that I kind of got caught up in the whole streaming thing. And it just kind of took over my life for a little bit. I've been streaming a lot on the Twitch channel. And I think I'll try and stream on this YouTube channel as well. So that's probably coming in the future too. What a wild ride it's been for me in the last month. It's interesting because I think when I did the first video, walking around at night like this, I had this feeling that I had disconnected from the community and I kind of wanted to rebuild that bridge. That was like a feeling. I just didn't know. I couldn't really say more than that. That was a feeling that I had, I think. And now that I started streaming, I kind of realized how much that bridge kind of means to me, in the sense that it gives me a feeling that I can sort of be more of an agent in my own life. One of the worst things about working as a freelancer is that a lot of the time you just kind of end up sitting around and waiting for stuff to happen. You know, you're like, hope somebody hires me. And if they don't, then I hope the next event hires me. And if they don't, then I sure hope the third event hires me. That can be very hard to deal with. Now, I didn't just sit around and wait. I feel like I've been doing a lot of things in the last 12 years. Skybox is a massive tool right now that is used by every pro team you can think of, more or less. And that didn't happen out of nowhere. And I've been working on a lot of other things in the background. But none of those things really had anything to do with the community directly. And I think as a result of that, I kind of ended up drifting away. And that feeling just, that feeling kind of hit me a lot. And I was also forced to kind of admit this. It wasn't just that it was a feeling. It was also that the consequences of this happening started to really sort of weigh in on my life in a really uncomfortable way, right? Because one of the things that I need to get hired, part of my job, is to be more visible and to be kind of more out there, sharing myself a little bit and doing interesting things and building up a bit of a brand about, who I am and what I'm doing and why you should hire me for an event. Why should you hire Anders? There are a lot of good people casting. Too many good people casting is kind of the problem. Not really for the community. That's awesome. We have tons of good Counter-Strike casters. But obviously for me personally, it's crazy. Too many good casters, not enough big events, is kind of what it boils down to. But sitting around and waiting is not good for your mental health. Take it from me. So I think coming back now to a space where I kind of started, we started Room on Fire and Puckcast before then, and NIP TV. It was about this community feeling. It was about this sense of, here we are, close to the community, being able to interact and kind of outputting things. I used to do a lot more things like, put out YouTube videos and stuff like that. That would go through, different funky grenades and all the rest of it. And I lost touch with that a little bit, and the stream has kind of reclaimed it for me. And that's just really awesome. I tried to not set any really big goals for the stream, but I feel like I'm living in kind of this weird split world where, on the one hand, it's important for me that the stream does well, because it increasingly looks and feels like it's going to be sort of more of a crutch for me to kind of do some work in the future if I'm going to be hired for events less. So that's important. But I don't want the stream to be about the numbers, I want to be able to do the stream whether I have 10 viewers or 100 viewers, And if I have my eye on that number the whole time, it's going to be a really bad experience for me, and certainly for anyone watching too. So I'm not sure how you solve that, right? It is important to do, a good job, produce a good product, you make something that's interesting. And it's important for that product to do well enough that other people and sort of slowly more and more people kind of want to gather around and do something. But it's also important that it's natural and fun. My wife sort of reminded me of this, I think on the second day that I was streaming. And I was talking about, this time, we had 17 people on the stream. It's really cool. People are kind of hanging out. They're talking, they're chatting, we're having a good time. And I think she said something like, just have fun. Like, don't forget about the numbers. Just have fun. And I think that's weirdly sort of sage advice. I've casted with a lot of people in the last 12 years. Very often I've got hired in the past, and even up until recently, for events where the organizer will sort of say, hey, do you want to work with this person you've never really worked with before? It happened a couple of times with ESL Impact, for instance. Do you want to work with some new person that you haven't really, worked with before? And maybe they have, a bit limited casting experience or whatever. And I always say yes. I always think it's nice to work with new people, and it's nice if you have a lot of experience to kind of like share that around and try to get more people into the industry. I like doing that. And I noticed some of those people are really nervous and they're worried about like, technically, how do we do the casting? And how do you want to do, like, are you going to be play by play? Do you want to do this? Like, how are we going to set up the roles? Who's talking most? And I find myself often saying basically the same thing. It's like, let's just have fun. We all love Counter-Strike. Like, let's just enjoy that and then share that enjoyment with whoever is watching. And I think the stream thing has become the same thing for me. I've noticed now when I sit down in the evening, it doesn't feel so much like, I have to produce like a high-level thing. It feels more like I have things that I'm interested in. I want to know how the pro teams play. So I'm going to use Skybox to figure that out and kind of go through in detail how to do it. And if I enjoy that, then apparently there's also a segment of people out there who enjoy that too. Sick. Let's go. Sometimes it's high-level Counter-Strike like that. Sometimes it's me playing Counter-Strike and the level is a little bit lower. But then we can laugh at that. And I still like playing Counter-Strike. And I haven't had a chance to for a really long time, like since CS2 came out almost. So I'm kind of reconnecting with the game in some sense, which is, I think, probably really important for me. Even as a caster, it's important. So there's something there as well that's just kind of interesting for me to experience. And maybe if we're playing Path of Exile or Marvel Rivals or some other game in the future, as long as I'm enjoying it and there is that sort of shared sense of community and we can kind of have a good time together, I think that's at least one of the big keystones of it. So I don't know where it will take me. I obviously hope that what will happen is that I do get hired for some big events in the future. Fingers crossed and all that. But if I do that, I want to take the stream with me. I don't want to do what I did last time and ditch the streaming stuff and then kind of go and do casting again. So I'm making a promise to sort of keep that up and make that interesting. But I'm also kind of realizing that there are a lot more people than maybe I realized, that maybe I gave the community credit for, that, that kind of have my back a lot more. I don't know how obvious it is, but I'm a super introverted person. But in the context of like video games and especially Counter-Strike maybe, like I get excited and I like talking about it, and it kind of makes me temporarily a little bit more extrovert. But the introverted part of me is the part that kind of like says, well, there are so many good casters, there are all these other things, like who cares about it, what you're doing. And when that voice takes over, I end up talking myself maybe out of doing some things that I could be doing, like streaming, like content, like podcasts. Like there are probably a lot of other things that I could be doing. And yeah, I just drifted away from some of that stuff it wasn't like a decision I made. It just sort of happened, over a long period of time. And that's a real shame, and that's kind of my own fuck up. And it's cost me quite a bit now, and in in terms of like sort of personal setback, I would say. But it is what it is. Like there's no, I can't go back and change it now. I wish I hadn't started streaming a month ago. I wish I'd started streaming 3 or 4 years ago and made content along the way, and maybe spend a little bit less time with some of these other, hold on, train break. Nice. Maybe spend a little bit more time with the community, because like I said, we're streaming this ICE Invitational where Nexus and M80 and 500 and Sashi were playing. So maybe not the most big headline teams, right? But pretty decent teams. Some cool players in there, I thought. And it was Neo and I just casting it on my channel. And I was actually shocked by the amount of people that showed up, and just to express some sense of like, hey Anders, we miss you, and we kind of, when's your next event, thanks for casting this, but also when are you going to be back in an arena? We really want to see that. And that made me feel a weird mix of emotion, a mix of like gratitude for like that kind of support, but also made me feel like a bit guilty that I didn't really forget about it, but it was more like somebody waving at a distance, So yeah, it made me feel like, there really are people out there who care about what I'm doing. It means a lot. Like, I put a lot of effort into this. Counter-Strike in one way or another has been my whole life, and most especially my whole adult life. But I mean, I've been playing the game since 1999. Like, half the friendships I have are because of Counter-Strike. Half the music I listen to are from old frag movies. Obviously, I've been casting the game for 12 years. I've made a whole company that employs like 15 people or something. And that's being used by every pro team to now essentially elevate how quickly the game can evolve, right? Like, I don't know how many people I've helped into this space, either as casters or analysts, but it's a lot. So I feel like I've put in some effort, over the years. But I guess there's some voice inside of me sometimes that kind of says something maybe closer to, like it's not enough, or you're a little bit on your own somehow. And I think that's the more introverted side of me. That is super bad sometimes at reaching out to people and saying, hey, I need a helping hand, or in this case, reaching out to the community, you guys, and saying, hey, I really appreciate it, and the support means a lot. And ultimately, hopefully, if enough people want me to come to events, then that will have an impact on the future, right? But even if it does, I don't want to kill this bridge that I've only been building it for a month, so let's not go too crazy. But I don't want to end up in a situation again where suddenly I'm like, oh, now the casting is back, and now the streaming and the content and the podcasting or whatever else is out there for me to do, now that's dead again. So while my life is pretty complicated right now, I'm not going to lie about it, it is. I am actually in a weird way kind of thankful, because I think I learned a lot in the last month. So something else that I also learned now that we're talking about it. Neo and I were co-streaming the Blast Bounty event, Weren't hired to do it, but we were like, well, let's do it anyway. There's going to be a ton of other co-streams. There's the main Blast broadcast, which is amazing. So probably not going to get a great amount of viewers, but I mean, Neo loves Counter-Strike, so it's easy to convince him to do it. For me, I had this feeling, my motivation to do it, apart from the fact that I'm getting into streaming and I kind of want to do that more, was that in the beginning, when I started casting, it's no joke to say that for the first year, I think I casted every single game of Counter-Strike that was played in any region that was possible to access. There might have been games that are happening in Malaysia or China that I just couldn't know about because of language barrier reasons. But any game that was an HLTV or ESCA or a little bit later on Faceit, I was casting. Semler and I would cast European games of Counter-Strike from 5 or 6 in the afternoon until midnight or 1 in the morning-ish, depending on the delays. It was online Counter-Strike. There was a lot of DDoSing back then. So about 6-7 hours of Counter-Strike for the European time zone. Then the Americans typically start playing around, call it 2 in the morning European time. So we'd have a bit of a break. And then we would cast all the American games until it was about 7 in the morning European time. And then I would go to bed and I would sleep and I would wake up and do it again and again and again and again. So, that's crazy. Also because we weren't making any money doing it. My girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, she pretty much had to carry the bills for a long time for this to work out, which is in itself crazy. But the big upside for me was there's no player or team that you could have come to me with a question about and said, hey Anders, what do you think about these people? And I wouldn't know exactly. There wasn't a person alive back then that watched more Counter-Strike than me. It wasn't possible. It's just not, no one could have done it. Because there was no more Counter-Strike to be watched, basically. And in a modern day, the modern version of Counter-Strike, Anders, can't really make the same claim. And that sucks. And that's my fault. I can't watch all the games because there are too many. We're not in 2013. So, we can't do that. But I can watch a lot more than I have been doing. The truth is, if you came to me in the middle of last year and you said, hey, tell me about some top teams like G2, how do they play? Who's your favorite AWP right now if you couldn't pick Saibu or Monacy? Maybe I would have a way to answer that. But if you come to me with a top 25 team, man, there's a chance I might not know who's on some of those rosters. I might be sort of oh, damn, who's actually on 500 these days, Aurora, when they showed up for the RMR in Paris. Did I recognize some of the names? Yes. But I didn't have any opinion about them, They were just a team, And in a way, that's disappointing to me. I don't want to be a caster like that. I want to be somebody who has a little bit more insight. Maybe I can't watch every game. That's crazy. But I don't want to be so disconnected from this that I can't sort of be a part of the conversation and that I can't sort of have my finger on the pulse a bit more. Which is also one of the really fun things with what Neo and I have been doing a bit more now, which is Neo has, I don't know, he knows way more tier 2 teams than you could imagine. But not just who they are or whatever, how do they play, who was on what team, who's up and coming, why this person was ditched, even though they look good, and so on and so forth. And that's really interesting. I think there's so much value in that's just kind of out there. And I really appreciate that. So yeah, another lesson for me, I think. I'm not saying that I'm going to be watching all Counter-Strike games, but I want to be, just a little bit more tuned into what's happening, I think is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, some hard lessons, to be honest, for me to come by. If I could have had the choice, having to go down this road that I'm currently on or not, I would have probably said, no, thank you. Not interested. But I feel like something good will come of it, And in the meantime, because I promised myself I wouldn't make this another kind of thank you video, because it's a bit cringe over time if every video ends with a big thank you. And you guys will start to think way too highly of yourselves too, and that's dangerous. But yeah, I think what I would say is, I'm going to try and set up the stream to stream on YouTube. There's some content that I want to make that I'm going to try and put out there and see what happens. And if you guys have any ideas of stuff you want to do, then throw them my way and I'll see if I can oblige. I enjoyed casting the Ice Invitational. I hope I could do more things like that in the future. You know, on the channel, have people come by. The support was crazy. Co-streaming stuff was really fun, very different, but also a good vibe. We had Vince in there as well some of the days, which was really awesome. Vince is just such a nice person to hang out with. So yeah, if you guys are into these things, then drop a comment, leave a like, I think is what people say. Hit the bell for notification, whatever. You know the YouTube thing. But anyway, I appreciate the support, and I hope you guys are hanging in there. You know, we'll get through all of it eventually. Peace, and I'll see you in the next one.